forth, smashing down foes with every strike. There were downsides to being a hero. It was a lonely job in a strange land where you couldn't make a bit of sense out of the local language. You wound up saving the place over and over, and no one ever bothered to say thank you. The only people who really got him were other heroes, and they didn't always want to have much to do with him either. But Carl didn't care about any of that. This was what he lived for. He never felt more alive than when he was beating down mobs and taking their loot. The zombies crowded so thick around Carl that they couldn't all get at him. Despite this, the skeletons kept shooting at him, planting arrows in the backs of their zombie pals. Carl spun about like a top, hacking away with his sword in every direction. Zombies fell away from him, toppling like saplings before an axe. Few of them managed to lay a rotting finger on him, and even those glanced off his armor, leaving him unharmed. As the crowd of groaning zombies around him thinned, an arrow finally made its way through the melee and caught him on the shoulder. It stuck in his armor as if it had been fired into a tree. The tip of it had punctured the iron and stabbed into his skin, although not much farther. The magnitude of the injury didn't matter to Carl. The fact that he'd been damaged at all made him see red. "Hey!" he shouted at the skeletons. "That hurt!" Furious, Carl put down the last of the zombies with a few quick blows and then turned his attention to the skeletons. "You'll pay for that," he told them, "with your bones." He flanked the skinny monsters, moving to line them up in a rough row so they couldn't all shoot at him at once. Then he began chopping his way through them like a farmer taking down grains at the harvest. The creatures peppered him with arrows, sticking several more into his armor, but all they did was make him angrier. Fighting skeletons was supposed to be fun for him, not dangerous. As the last bony beast fell before his mighty blade, Carl let loose a howl of triumph and spun about to see who else might want a piece of him. His eyes fell upon the hapless Illagers, who had turned to face him, their weapons out and ready. Apparently, they'd found their courage in the defeat of the undead. They were too witless to shiver at his approach. Foes with any brains in their heads would have fallen to their knees and begged for mercy. But these nomadic raiders actually charged at him as if they stood a chance. The ridiculousness of the moment brought a laugh to Carl's lips once again. The anger he'd felt at the skeletons faded away, and he roared with delight as he threw himself and his sword against the oncoming Illagers. Before he could reach them, though, one of the Illagers, a particularly short one with a massive nose, raced forward, spun about, and shouted something at his compatriots. He seemed to be pleading with them to show some sense, something that Carl had long decided wasn't worth bothering with when it came to such people. "They won't listen," Carl said to the little Illager, even though he knew no one could understand him. "They never do." Out of morbid curiosity, he held up and let the tiny guy speak. If the imp wanted to keep his buddies from trying to take off Carl's head, well, he wasn't going to stop him. But he wasn't going to lower his sword either. The little guy gibbered along in his barbaric language, begging the others to see reason, to be swayed by the power of his logic, emotion, and words. Carl marveled at it, the way he would have if he'd spotted a two-headed pig roaming around the village. Amazing, but really beside the point. It didn't matter how crazy it looked. It wasn't going to make a difference. In the end, he was still going to whack it with his sword. Probably. The other Illagers listened to the little guy for a moment, but they steamed at him, clearly unhappy with whatever he was blathering about. The little guy's voice rose almost to a squeak as he reduced himself to what Carl could only interpret as actual begging. It ended when the Illager standing right in front of the little guy reached out and smacked him on the side of the head with the flat of his sword. That put a sudden end to the squeaking, and the little guy toppled right over, senseless, before he hit the ground. Before the bigger Illager could even call for an attack, Carl took him out.